good morning. Welcome to Issues That Matter. And I think we have an informational packed show for you today. I have the honor and privilege of having a gubernatorial candidate on who is the guest of this show that has been on most frequently of all the guests that we've had.
I just keep coming back.
Mary Mayhew, a Republican gubernatorial candidate in today's gubernatorial field. Mary, welcome.
Thank you, Bob.
Pleasure to see you again.
Glad to be back.
Well, I'm glad you have that opinion.
I can find my way.
Hopefully, you'll have that same opinion at the end of the show. In any event, Mary, how are things going?
Oh, Bob, what a privilege and an honor to be out campaigning, to be meeting with families and individuals and businesses throughout the state, to hear about their concerns, their dreams, where they want to see Maine go. It's been amazing. I am enjoying it. And what has been so heartening is to hear from folks how pleased they are about the direction that we've been taking this state, how thrilled they are with the reforms that I led as part of the LePage administration. And they know that there's a lot at stake in this gubernatorial election. They want to protect what we've done, and they know that we've got an opportunity to aggressively build on this foundation to grow Maine's economy.
Yep. What are the issues that for lack of a better word, I'll say the negative issues that are out there? And there's a lot of negativity out there these days. But what are the things that are going on that are not necessarily viewed as positive? And as an example, let me ask you the question.
Sure. Get those glasses on.
Oh yes. Oh,
I've got mine, but
a function of age, and the fact that I couldn't pick them up the first time is a function of coordination. The citizens initiative process.
It's interesting to me how much anger there is throughout the state, and I mean everywhere in the state. The anger and frustration about the Citizens Initiative process and what it has brought to our state. You know, as messy as the legislative process may be, it is a critically important process. You want robust debate. You want questions to be asked. You want data to be presented to have informed decisions. When voters are presented with a 2-sentence initiative in the ballot box, it is absolutely hijacking the legislative process, but worse, it's distorting priorities. You know, for the last couple of years, the legislature hasn't been able to focus on a strategic vision and critical priorities. Instead, they have been consumed by a handful of initiatives: minimum wage increase, a 3% tax, legalizing marijuana, Medicaid expansion. That has absolutely undermined the legislative process. And worse, you know, these are brought to us by extreme liberal organizations that are often funded by outside organizations. Maine's a cheap date. Doesn't cost a lot for them to hire signature gatherers who can hang out in Portland, get enough signatures, get it on the ballot, and then again, these out-of-state organizations fund the campaign.
I suspect I know the name of one of those organizations that you were referring to, but I'm not going to state that name because I don't want to give them any free press.
Okay, all right. This organization that shall remain nameless, Maine People's Alliance.
That's right.
Yeah,
and that's what they're doing it to advance their agenda, which may or may not be in the best interest of the state.
You know, and it's not lost on voters throughout the state. So we've got to reform it. Let's just cut to the chase here. We have got to raise the bar. We need to make sure that signatures are collected throughout the state. So a certain percentage of signatures should be collected in every state Senate district so that it is more geographically representative of voters in this state. to make it, much more appropriate. And then I would argue we need to make sure that there's a certain percentage of voters who adopt. So let's use the Medicaid expansion. You had 30% of all registered voters turn out last November, and of that 30%, only 60% supported. So you're talking a fraction of registered voters approving an initiative that had a $400 million price tag over 4 years for all state taxpayers. It's just not right.
Mary, you've got to show more.
I was going to say, but I don't feel strongly about any of this.
You have to express more commitment to your views.
Yes, I am passionate.
I almost felt like you were jumping out of me.
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, get a little animated.
What are your thoughts on voter ID?
Well, I'm the one that led the charge to put photos on EBT cards. And I did that because the integrity of our welfare programs had absolutely been sacrificed when EBT cards, which are providing cash welfare and food stamps intended for basic necessities, food, clothing, diapers, those EBT cards were being trafficked in for drugs and cash. So we moved forward to put photos on. The governor and I felt very strongly that photos on EBT cards would serve as a deterrent and to restore the integrity. I think the same could be argued for improving the integrity of our voter system. I have to show my ID to get on a plane. I have to show my ID to check into a hotel. It is not unusual to have to produce an ID for something that is so important to our system of government, our voting, our election process. Why wouldn't we want something that would help to protect?
If I go into a store to make a $15 purchase and pay by check, guess what? I have to show an ID.
Right.
For $15.
It's not unusual. It's part
They would, yeah.
Right, and the reason that you show an ID is to make sure that they know it's you. It is about integrity. The very same thing that we all have talked about with regard to our elections. It's important that we protect the integrity of our elections.
I agree.
This is going to be a problem, you and I agreeing. I don't think we're going to. I think we're going to struggle to find.
It'll be. I'll say it'll be more of a problem for you than it is for me.
Okay, no. I don't believe that's true.
Well, thank you. It's nice to have your vote of confidence.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
this is all common sense. That's why.
Another issue that I think is on people's minds is school choice.
Yes. I feel strongly that parents should have an opportunity to make the decision about where their child or how to educate their child. So we talk anyway in education about local control, local governance. Well, true local control is placing that responsibility with the parent. And so I am absolutely in favor of school choice. I want to empower parents to make decisions because for every child, there may be a different school, a different model, whether that's homeschooling, whether that's a charter school, that will best meet the needs of their child, and we need to support that. Now, that is not going to undermine the strength of our public K-12 system, but it is going to hopefully drive a level of healthy competition that we know generally. Healthy competition raises the bar, helps to support improved quality, which is a goal that we all share for our educational system.
One of my concerns is on what basis are they judging quality? Are they judging the quality of the education or the quality of the looks of the building?
Well, truly for the parent, it should be up to their decision to evaluate. I I'm a firm believer that individuals are quite capable, parents should be quite capable of evaluating and making that decision. But we've got a problem generally, Bob, that there is so much noise and confusion around what we need to be focused on for outcomes in education that I don't think it's clear to anyone. Well, where do I go today to evaluate how well my school is performing? There are so many different tests. We need to get back to fundamentals and basics. What's the reading test score? What's the math score? What's the science and math proficiency? We need to get back to objective measures, not 20, 30 different measures, but just basic measures on math, reading, science, English, so that we know are our schools helping to support our children getting the best possible education to achieve the highest outcomes.
And how do you see something like that coming about? How can you support that issue, that goal?
Well, you know, I tend to draw a lot of parallels between healthcare and education. Healthcare, similarly, for years, lots of money, billions of dollars being spent, but we really didn't know how to evaluate our system in terms of quality and the efficient use of resources. Back 20 years ago, Medicare started pushing for data and information to compare hospitals, as an example, to compare one hospital to the next, and to focus on things like their infection rate, or to drive adherence to evidence-based protocols that were proven to produce better outcomes, like the management of someone with diabetes or asthma. So we've come a long way in healthcare in acknowledging that, yes, you can compare hospitals, you can evaluate quality outcomes. I think with education, we've got to develop laser beam focus on a handful of core measures that are indicators of the total educational system. A few years ago, in the early years of the LePage administration, they produced report cards for every school. I'm a huge supporter of public reporting. I think it provides, as long as it's credible information, everyone agrees, yes, this is a fair basis to evaluate schools and educational outcomes. I want to get back to that. I want, just back to your question, how does a parent know? Well, let's get good, credible, reliable, meaningful information into the hands of parents, into the hands of taxpayers, so that they can truly evaluate. Today we spend, we're in the top tier of the country in terms of what we spend per student. We need to know, what is that producing for outcomes that everyone can easily understand.
A simple question that just pops into my mind is, what are we doing at the state level currently that gives us, you said we rank very highly nationally.
In terms of the amount of money
What are we doing
spend.
different than the other states?
Well, that's, normally when you think about money, we often equate the more you spend with the higher outcomes. That's not necessarily the case.
I agree.
Right?
I totally agree with you.
So it would be certainly great to be in the top tier in what we spend if we were also producing a top tier worth of outcomes.
When you said we're in the top tier, you're talking about the top tier of expense.
Spending, exactly,
Okay.
right.
All right.
So we've got to look at it. We know as a state there is nothing more important than educating our children. That is in their best interest so that they can be successful, independent adults, so that we can provide a workforce that's ready, willing, and able and prepared to take on the jobs that are here in Maine today and the jobs that we need in the future. But we have got to get serious about measuring, defining first, what's the quality bar, and measuring it objectively, and getting that information into the hands of the public. And it can be done. I know it can be done. But unfortunately, you'll find a lot of individuals want to make this overly complicated, and it shouldn't be. We've got to bring this back to basics. Can our
The
kids...
simpler it is,
Yes.
the better it is.
Right, and have laser beam focus on it. Not to be punitive in any way, Bob, and I think that's often, and that was certainly the case in healthcare. People feared the comparison and the public reporting, worried about how it would affect them. What we've got to get is everyone focused on the value of that objective reporting is to drive improvement, to increase our performance, to make Maine competitive and attractive to other families to move to Maine, for businesses to come to Maine. We need to have that kind of strong educational infrastructure.
And this conversation is bringing to the fore of my mind a very fundamental, in my view, very fundamental fact. And the very fundamental fact is we've got to spend more time thinking about those things that we have in common in views, and stop focusing on all of the things that we might be different on. And we've got to, and we can rally around the flagpole, if you will, about the things that we feel strongly about as a group, as everybody feels strongly about. Rally around that flagpole and develop a level of communication amongst the group, amongst the people, that they can change a little bit what they're looking at, but maintain a spirit of cooperation, which I view as being very, very fragmented at best.
It is, fueled largely because of the media and the sensational approach to reporting. When you have reporters who are both blogging or tweeting their personal opinions and then turning around and writing an article, and somehow we're supposed to believe that when they write that article, they're now objective. We know that that is contributing to the polarizing approach to discussing many of these issues. Here's what I know. As governor, when I'm governor, Bob,
Yep.
in order to move Maine forward, we have to develop support for many of these critical issues. And almost any issue can become partisan and polarizing, but it's the governor's job to lead the charge, to educate, to use the microphone effectively, to communicate with the public. I've done that. I did that as commissioner of DHHS. You know, as controversial as the media wants to portray me, when you think about what the governor accomplished, much of it is focused on what I led at DHHS with the governor. And it was about restoring fiscal stability, making sure that our limited resources were taking care of our elderly and disabled, supporting a more effective pathway out of poverty by incentivizing work. I got those reforms through a legislature that was deeply divided. But I did that both in terms of my own engagement, personal engagement with the legislature to answer their questions, but I also went out and spoke to the public. I talked to Rotary clubs, to Kiwanis clubs, to local organizations. I met with the press. When you communicate and share meaningful information to voters, they get to exercise their role in communicating with their respective legislators. And that's what we've got to be talking about on these critical issues, like education, like roads and bridges, supporting effective investment in our infrastructure.
Which leads me to my next question. Where do you see the challenges that we face going relative to the infrastructure?
So we've turned the corner in this state. For once, we have a legacy, thanks to Governor LePage, to protect. We've got financial stability, and that cannot be said for a host of other states right now. Connecticut, nearby Connecticut, imploding, can't pay their Medicaid bills. You know, they've finally learned that I guess you can't tax as though the sky is the limit. There are consequences to that. So we've taken Maine back. It's a big ship to turn, and we have turned it. But there is still much more that needs to happen in order to grow our economy.
Such as?
So we've got to get in the race to be competitive with other states. When you can move across the border to New Hampshire and immediately have a lot more money in your pocket. So we're not talking about moving to sunny Florida here, just to New Hampshire. and because of their no income tax, no sales tax, you're talking about a very different economic environment. And they today lead the country in per capita income. So for Maine to compete with New Hampshire, with Texas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, we got to get in the game. So we've got to continue our efforts to cut taxes, ultimately to eliminate the income tax. And I know it can be done because I oversaw the largest state agency. It's where the vast majority, between education and DHHS, that's the lion's share of all state spending. And there are many opportunities to further reduce the size and scope of government, inappropriate spending, things that government shouldn't be doing, or ineffective spending. But here's what I also know. When you stimulate the economy, you stimulate more revenue to the state. So we need to really embrace an effort to grow Maine's economy. We got to get government out of the way. I want to give you a perfect example. I walked into this little store in Pittsfield, Maine, my hometown, a restaurant called Popovers. And the couple new to this business, committed to this lovely restaurant in downtown Pittsfield. And Pittsfield has struggled of late with losing Edwards Manufacturing Company, and several years back losing San Antonio Shoe. Edwards Manufacturing had been, well, my dad worked there many, many, many years ago, and they made fire alarms, et cetera. And so this couple said to me, it is so frustrated because they feel like every time they turn around, there's some new regulation they weren't anticipating, some new tax they weren't planning for. They're just trying to survive. The way that I look at this when I meet with so many of these businesses, they're barely surviving. Imagine how successful these businesses could be if we got government out of the way and out of their pocket.
How much of that government is state influence as opposed to federal?
Oh, the vast majority of it is state, right? I mean, this is a restaurant, so it's building codes, it's public health inspections, it's labor. There's just so many regulations. It's mind-numbing because we've been in this period of government growing because it believes it knows best and that it can somehow protect us from ourselves, right? Just completely contrary to what we all know. Government needs to be limited. And so when I talk about getting competitive with these other states, it is because I want to protect the businesses that are here. I want them to be able to stay and to thrive. And then when we do that, we're going to look very attractive to other businesses. Let's use one other example, energy costs. We know that we're not competitive. I was up in Aroostook County meeting with and touring the McCain potato, right? They're committed to Aroostook County. But that plant pays as much in wages as it does in energy. And it's competing with a plant in Idaho that has a third of the energy costs. So while we are grateful for their commitment to Aroostook County, to the farmers in Aroostook County, is that sustainable when that's what you're dealing with for that kind of a lopsided competitiveness?
How do you see it? How do you see that changing?
Well, we've got to get aggressive with getting energy costs lower. We've got to have affordable energy options. What we can't do is have government picking and choosing winners and propping any of those up such that ratepayers and taxpayers are footing the bill for a energy option that on its own is not financially viable. We also know, Bob, that we've had environmental regulations, extreme environmental regulations that have discouraged and taken away from the opportunity to leverage hydro, as an example. And we've got to get natural gas into this state. And right now, the state of Massachusetts is blocking that pipeline, and we've got to confront that. We know that Massachusetts wants Hydro-Quebec. So here's an opportunity for us to negotiate much more aggressively with Massachusetts so that they get what they want and we get what we need, which is natural gas. So we've got to get in the game. and truly understand that our economic future, the opportunity to be successful, is focused not only on our tax burden, but driving down the cost of energy in the state.
How does Massachusetts block our ability to get natural gas?
The permitting for that pipeline has been hung up in Massachusetts. And you know, they're trying to diversify their energy mix. They're looking for other, like Hydro-Quebec, but we don't have anywhere near the dependency. Maine is still highly oil. I burn with wood. I heat my home with wood. So, but Massachusetts has significant dependency on natural gas. But nonetheless, the pipeline's coming through that state, so their permitting is hung up and is delaying our access.
So they're not giving us the permit to access their gas line.
Right, they're not permitting it through their state, and that's what's critical for us. So we've got to figure out how to leverage and get support from Massachusetts. But we've got to acknowledge that we've had some environmental issues that have detracted, or environmental regulations that have detracted from our opportunity to get reliable, cost-effective energy options for families and for businesses. And then there are other issues that are contributing to this too. The cost of transmission and distribution in our state has increased significantly, and many people have seen that on their CMP bills over the last several months. So we've got to get at that as well and understand what's going on and what role we have to create greater transparency around those costs.
And one of the factors that is near and dear to my heart is the fact that we have the eldest population in the country, and a much overlooked factor that I was never aware of is that we have the oldest housing stock in the country. And I would imagine the energy factor that we're speaking of is critical to the economic stability relative to that old housing stock.
Yeah, I live in an 1840 Cape. Part of it, I've got some additions, but you know, I can feel the wind coming in. So there's the positives to that, right? I've got good air quality in the house as a result.
You got good air turnover.
Air turnover, yes, but no doubt heat loss as a result. But so that just pertains to how many more cords of wood I need to order and have at the ready. And of course, the early part of this winter, back in December, early January, I was definitely burning through that wood fast, as I know everyone was contending with extremely cold winter. But no, I think the housing stock in this state is an issue. Now, there have been lots of programs to help support rebates to, but
I think Maine Housing does a super job.
Yes, so I think we need to make sure that those programs are working, that they're efficient, that they're effective to support that. But that's Maine. That's not going to change. You know, unlike, although again, I'd like to see the kind of economic housing boom development when you travel south into other states. You see new developments, new housing going up all over the place. Maine hasn't really experienced that. Certainly not all over the state. But that doesn't mean, you know, part of the reason why I'm running for governor is because I'm tired of the defeatist attitude that has for too long dominated this state. You know, for the last 7 years, the governor has had a very positive vision for where Maine can be, and I share that. I don't want to see Maine just bumping along the bottom. I know that Maine can grow our economy. When I am in any other state, and I mention that I'm from Maine, people's eyes light up because of what they associate with Maine. We need to leverage that brand with economic opportunity, right? It's not enough to just love the state. We've got to give people an opportunity to have good paying jobs, to be independent, self-sufficient, and to raise their families.
Yep. One of the topics that I've had a series of shows on over the past couple of years, a few years, veterans issues. And I know veterans, and that's one of the positive things that have come about due to our experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think we've developed a heightened awareness and a heightened importance to veterans.
But we're
Where do you see the veteran issue being currently in the state?
Yeah, we're still not doing enough. The bottom line is, when government tries to be all things to all people, it ignores its basic mission. And I feel as though support of our veterans has not been front and center. That our veterans, for the service that they have provided to our country, the sacrifices that they have made, we should be absolutely prioritizing and helping to support their needs. And that needs to occur on multiple fronts. Now, while their health care is regulated at the federal level, I think there's greater transparency that Maine could help to support and lend a voice to, making sure that in Maine, do our veterans believe that the system, the healthcare system, is effectively supporting high quality and appropriate access? So we need to be focused on how do we gather that information and share it. Another area that I think is very troubling, you have veterans returning from military service with a wealth of experience, but it often doesn't translate immediately to a particular educational background for a license, for a certification in a particular profession. We need to establish a comparability approach. If they've had X years of service and experience in a particular area, as an Army medic, as a technology work that they may have done, we need to create a bridge, a pathway into those licensed professions back here in Maine without all the hurdles and the barriers, so that we are acknowledging their wealth of experience. And I would say, from my role in the Department of Health and Human Services, one of the areas that I championed was identifying. When someone comes through our door, let's make sure that we identify whether or not they've had any military service, so that we then support getting them access to the benefits that they are entitled to, but may not be aware that they are eligible for. And I mean benefits through the Veterans Administration. So we've done a great job of tracking individuals, identifying them, and supporting them navigate the system.
Yep. It strikes me as almost, I don't know, I can't even come up with the right word here. It's nonsensical.
It really,
that a person who's been in the military, been trained by the military on various things, comes into the world of private citizen, and all of that education that they received is not acknowledged.
No, but there's hope. There's a gentleman, Matt Leonard, who was in the military, has developed this business approach that I am so impressed with, and he is serving as a executive recruiter for businesses to align a business's needs with veterans who are out there in looking for work, but helping to support that connection between that veteran with that wealth of experience and training. So rather than going to the veteran, he's going to the businesses to look at the, we've got a crisis right now with employers who are desperate for employees, are desperate to fill senior leadership positions. And so he's helping to create that bridge between what he's identified from businesses as their needs with the veterans that he knows who have certain areas of expertise.
One of the disconnects that I've observed nationally, I mean, our unemployment rate is so much better now than it used to be. I mean, we've gone through
historically low
halcyon of years with high unemployment. Now we don't have high unemployment anymore. I mean, Maine is doing very well in that.
Yes.
Yet, what I see is reversed. Now employers cannot find people.
No, and the unemployment rate is somewhat deceiving because it reflects those who are looking for employment. seeking employment. We've got a problem in this state and in this country that for decades there are two programs, welfare programs and disability, that have discouraged employment, where individuals are worried if they work, they will lose their benefits. So we have millions of individuals in this country who have checked out of the workforce, and it takes a long time to dig out of that crater. So I led the charge to put work requirements back in place in our food stamp program for able-bodied adults without dependents. We have a petition pending now in front of President Trump to put work requirements into our Medicaid program, again, for able-bodied adults, not to be punitive, but to acknowledge that the best pathway out of poverty is a job. If you are on Medicaid, if you are on food stamps, it means that you are living in poverty. So this is about recognizing, or even disability, Bob. If you are on disability, we similarly have committed you to a lifetime of poverty. So how do we support people back into the workforce so that they can be independent and self-sufficient?
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you.
If I knew that answer, I'd be running for governor.
Well, we need to make sure that all our programs don't discourage work, that a job is not a dirty word, that this is about caring about individuals and helping them to fulfill their potential. I met a young woman recently who just continues to reinforce why this matters. She was a young woman who had been in a car accident, had gotten addicted to her pain meds, had a morphine pump, turned to then heroin, got involved with crime, hit rock bottom, had also had 2 daughters, lost those children to Child Protective Services. And when she hit rock bottom, she began to rebuild her life, and it started with a job. She was working at a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and she talks with pride about what that job taught her and how that job began to restore her human dignity.
I can speak from personal experience. I was a participant in the program, the CSEP program, Senior Community Service Involvement Program. Did I get that right?
You did.
Oh boy, I'm proud of myself. Yes, which put me here. Something that I never dreamed of ever doing. I mean, if somebody would just ask me what was my flowers off accomplishment that you never dreamed of doing, this is it.
Isn't it amazing?
Being a host on a talk show. I can hardly talk. I can hardly get a sentence out without screwing it up. And I'm hosting a talk show. In any event,
you've done great. What are you talking about?
Oh, thank you. In any event, there's got to be a way to meld the two. And for some reason in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if a person's disabled, if they can show that they're disabled and they're doing things on a volunteer basis, such as the Senior Community Service Employment Program, that should give them some weight as far as credibility.
Well, let's just acknowledge that the disability program has also been hijacked, right? We know that there are lawyers who solely work to get people made eligible for disability. Mm-hmm. You know, I'll never forget going through a substance abuse treatment program for teenagers, for adolescents, and I had a young man say to me, "I've got a disability application pending. Can you help me get that approved?" Can you imagine, 19 years old, and thinks that his ticket, his dream is going to be fulfilled by getting a disability determination. That's a problem. If you are capable of work and can earn an income, and we're not talking about people with significant disabilities, but I am talking about individuals who certainly may have some additional challenges, but it doesn't mean that we can't find the right opportunity so that they can earn an income and continue to have economic mobility and earn more.
I think what I'm thinking about is something along the lines that instead of having it be a job-related thing, a money or income-related thing from a job, if a person does volunteer work for a 501(c) organization, that could qualify as employment.
Well, the work requirements that we put in place in food stamps includes volunteering. The ones that we have submitted for consideration in the Medicaid program include volunteering. But let's be clear, it's because we want that to be a pathway to get people re-engaged. And we're talking, in those instances, with able-bodied adults. But what I know, listening to that young woman who'd been addicted to pain meds and then ultimately heroin, when she was getting her disability check, she said she didn't dream. She didn't dream about her life, she had no goals. She was just waiting for the next disability check to arrive in the mail. That's no way of life. And when I met her and heard her speak, this is a woman who is now, she went back to school, she became licensed as a massage therapist. She's now not only dreaming about future plans, but she's earning an income. She's reestablishing her relationship with her two daughters. I'm worried about a system that traps people, that concludes they're not capable of fulfilling their potential, that they can't change their circumstance. That's what's wrong with the system today. It looks down upon the individuals and concludes that they're not capable. We can't stand by and allow that kind of a system, whether that's disability or welfare, to trap people and create this vicious cycle where children are raised in an environment where they don't see their parents go off to work and they don't know what it means to be independent and self-sufficient. And all that comes with it. Again, it's not just the income. It is about the self-worth, the human dignity, the dignity of work. It's how I was raised. My parents got up, they worked hard, they taught me and my two sisters and brother about the work ethic and taking care of ourselves, being personally responsible. It matters.
It does. I've lived it.
Right? When you earn something, it has value. It's just, as a parent, I have two boys, 23 and 18. If they were given everything, would they work for any of it? Would it have value? When my youngest son, who worked and then earned enough for his first car, the difference with when he bought it, what that meant to him, it's indescribable. That's the same approach that I want to take as governor. I want to support individuals and families, not become dependent on government and that robs them of their human dignity, but to lead independent, fulfilling lives. We've got a problem, not just here in Maine, but in the country.
I think that's a problem that it's rampant. It's almost a problem that will always reemerge at some point. It's hard to maintain the level of momentum.
Although I will say that the Trump administration looks to Maine as a model. They see us as a leader. In the executive order that the president recently issued on welfare reform, he highlighted Maine because of what we have accomplished. Because Maine led the country in welfare dependency, the percentage of our population enrolled in some form of welfare. And today we lead the country in the reduction.
And it strikes me that there are more than enough people out there that will take what we view as being progress. They'll take it and they'll twist it around, and now it becomes a big concern that we're doing that. We should not be doing that. Somebody's getting hurt by this.
But I'll tell you something, people who get up out of bed every day and go to work, and I've talked to many around the state who are angry because they're watching their paycheck get smaller and smaller, and they know someone who is capable of work but is not working and is accepting a government check. There's something absolutely wrong with that situation when the hardworking family gets penalized. We've got to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to benefit from employment and all that that brings. Look, we've got a problem with children being raised in environments that are unhealthy, dysfunctional. To break the cycle, we've got to get back to the basics of values, of self-respect, of leading productive, meaningful lives. And for far too long, we've had a growth in government as though that's the answer. So I'm running for governor because I firmly believe we need to be growing our economy, not growing government. Because that is where we support all of the opportunities that matter most to individuals and families to be able to support themselves.
I mentioned a little while ago to you that I recently had the opportunity to co-host a show with Governor LePage on as guest to talk about keeping people in their homes, not having a home, an 85 or 75-year-old person risk losing their home because they owe the town $10,000 and they live in a house that may be valued at $200,000. And all too often, well, I shouldn't say all too often, but one of the things that does occur is that the town forecloses on the home, takes the $10,000, sells the house for $200,000, takes $10,000 out of that $200,000 to satisfy the tax debt, you might say, and pockets the other $190,000. I see that as being morally reprehensible. I know people involved in it from the other perspective, from the other side, think that, well, they could have sold the house. They should have sold the house and not run into that situation.
Right.
I don't buy that.
No, my goodness. I mean, think about what our homes mean to us, what our homes mean to us. Not just a house, it's a home.
Right.
And often for these individuals, are elderly, it's where they've raised their families. So we have to bring this back to what I have talked about at the state level that is certainly true often at the local level, and that's government that has grown to an extent that it has created an unsustainable tax burden on its residents. I mean, it's government at all levels that has gotten larger, and certainly at the local level, one of the biggest contributing factors is the cost of education.
I look at various towns, and I have not confirmed this with the town that I live in, but I suspect the town that I live in is one that does work with the people to try and resolve the issue well before foreclosure becomes a part of the picture. I would like to see the state government saying, no, you're not going to be able to do that. You cannot foreclose on that house unless you've proven that you've done everything possible to make it possible for that person to stay in the house. We will not abide by you making that person homeless.
Well, there are certainly best practices that we should be looking at and holding towns accountable to implement. I'm not a big fan of more laws, Bob.
Neither am I. I agree.
And you know, this balance between the role of the state and local control. I think that there has been great attention focused on this issue that should cause most municipalities to evaluate their own procedures to make sure that they are taking all of the steps and exhausting all of the steps before taking any other drastic measure. But it still comes back to our property taxes are high. They are much higher than other parts of the country, and that is a direct result of our government costs, largely education budgets. So what are we going to do to drive down inappropriate, ineffective spending that would directly support reduced property taxes?
And do you see any linkage between what we were just discussing in land trusts?
Yes, oh gosh, absolutely. You know, when you take more and more property off of the tax rolls, you leave the tax burden on a smaller and smaller percentage of the population. That's not right. And we know that a number of these land trusts, what they've done needs to be absolutely evaluated, and standards need to be put in place that would govern what is appropriate and what is not appropriate in terms of the land that they're removing from the tax rolls. That is exacerbating exactly what you and I have just been talking about. You know, there are a number of ways that we need to be supporting our elderly. And when we think about peace of mind and security as someone gets older, their ability to stay in their homes, whether that's making sure that they have appropriate access to services and supports, but certainly that they don't fear losing their home over property taxes, it should be front and center in the discussions about ever increasing local government costs and ways in which to address it.
Yeah. Bedford is a seaside community. Seaside communities, generally speaking, do have an interest in fisheries. Where do you see the fishery world going in the next administration?
Well, it's when you think about the heritage in our state and the fishing industry, and when I meet with individuals who are lobstermen, lobster women, they talk about it was their dad, their grandfather, mother that have been involved in the fishing industry. So it is not only critical to supporting our strong history of a fishing industry, but it's part of our economy. It's a significant part of our economy. What I think is critical from a governor's perspective is what's the vision? How, again, remember now, I don't see government playing some role in picking winning or losing industries.
The word cylindra comes to mind.
Yeah,
I've been fighting saying it, but I stopped fighting.
Well, it really comes down to what are the barriers that are impeding the success of the fishing industry? What are the some of the federal regulations today that threaten the livelihood of our fishing industry? The governor needs to lend a voice to their concerns in Washington, a loud voice. There are some extreme environmental regulations, Endangered Species Act concerns that will destroy, if the requirements that are being debated right now go forward on the lobster traps, it will destroy our lobster industry. And that's all coming out of Washington. So that the governor needs to absolutely raise her voice to make sure that Maine's lobster industry, fishing industry, is effectively represented in often dealing with those faceless bureaucracies in Washington, D.C. And then I think it's just looking across the board at any other labor issue, taxation, that detracts from the ability of those families to thrive.
I think we're pushing the clock.
We're pushing it. Have we done this already? We've made it through?
Well, I'm not done yet.
My gosh.
Calm down.
We go through
Relax.
this fast.
No, if there was one point that you want to make clear to the people that are watching this show right now, what would that one point be?
You know, Bob, this is a great state, and I am deeply committed to Maine and to Maine's future. And the reason why I believe I should be the next governor is because I know what it takes to make the tough decisions, to lead with my principles. And I know that at the end of the day, that it's not government. Government will never be a church, it'll never be a parent, it'll never be a grandparent. And we should never allow government to try to be any of those things. As governor, I want to make sure that we reduce the burden on families and businesses, that we get government out of the way, out of people's pockets, out of business accounts, so that families can succeed, businesses can thrive, communities can be engaged, and we can have a robust economic future. And I'm confident that Maine can have a much brighter future, and I'm determined to lead Maine forward.
Well, Mary, it's been a pleasure.
Always.
Thank you for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me back.
As I said earlier off air, I'll say it again on air, you have an open door.
Thank you. I will come
And
back.
I will also say any of the candidates that show up, that appear on the show will
But
have an open
especially
door.
me.
Come on now, Mary, I can't show favoritism.
All right, I can.
Okay, but it's been a pleasure.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Folks, have yourselves a great remainder of the day, and let's see. This is a little bit off tilt because it's Monday and not Friday, and normally we do the shows on Friday. But in any event, have a great day and have a great remainder of the week. Bye-bye.